Right, so before we project anything onto the surface, I sort of want to make it more regular. There are some corners that didn't quite register in the terrain data, and I'm just going to correct that. So I'm going to open this up. As you can see here, there's basically two nested components, one inside of another, and there's no reason for them to be because there are no additional components on the same level as this one. So I'm just going to press X to explode it because I don't need it to be in a separate level. It's going to take some time because it's a big component, so just let SketchUp do its thing. When as a side note, when SketchUp sort of freezes and doesn't respond, give it at least 20 seconds for the program to compute the operation that you tasked it to do before trying to restart it, because it might not necessarily crash. Okay, so let's go to the corner here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to patch this hole by creating additional geometry. I'm going to delete this line. Oh, you see what it did? So basically I tried to delete it, but because it's not a flat surface, it didn't. It deleted the two faces here. So in that case, instead of deleting it, I'll right click and click hide. There you go. Same thing with these corners. These might not align on the same z axis, which we'll see. Yeah, as you can see, if I lock the green axis, this point is quite higher than this one, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to freehand connect them like this. And as long as you connect faces via triangles, it's always going to make a face. So for it to make a face on a rectangle, all the points in the rectangle need to be at the same height, but if it's a triangle, it can be at different heights and there's no problem. So I'm going to make this into a triangle. When you do this, just be careful that, for example, this is a weird point. It's not exactly at the edge. Always be sure that your geometry is created on the end point of lines. Okay, I'm going to select these 4 and hide them, as well as this. Whoop, these 3, and right click hide as well. Gonna go here, do exactly the same thing. And the last one. Select the line, right click, hide. Okay, there you go. Alright, so corners are adjusted. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to move this upward, so until it's right over the our terrain rectangle. And I'm going to use this drape function. By clicking on it, it's going to tell me here in the lower corner, select the mesh on which you wish to drape. I'm going to select this, and now it's going to process it, and there you go. So now all of this data is successfully basically draped onto our 3D plane. And it gives us an idea of, the actual terrain on the lot in which we're interested. And that's pretty cool. So I don't really need this anymore, but I like to keep it just because it's always good to have a backup in case something happens to this mesh over here. So I'm going to move it to the side, but I'm not going to delete it. I'm just going to hide the layer. Some separate layers, so I'm just going to hide it. And the other thing that we need to place on this terrain are the trees here. So I'm going to go under, select them, move them upwards. And here I'm going to enter the component because these are basically all on a flat plane. They don't take into account elevation. So I'm going to enter this component and just basically move them downwards one by one. So the way I'm doing this is I'm grabbing one of them, I'm selecting the center point, and then I'm locking the Z axis. And what it'll do is that I can sort of move my mouse freely, and when it's going to go near a a point on the 3D terrain is going to basically stop. So I'm going to move all of the trees in that way downwards. I'm going to cycle forward here because this is fairly repetitive. Alright, so our trees are now correctly placed on the 3D terrain. So now what we're going to do is, even before we start making actual site layout plans, I just want to make the terrain that we're going to be placing the house on a bit clearer for ourselves to ease up our modeling process. So I'm going to go ahead, go here and select everything, and then deselect our terrain and color all of the other geometry first in a, let's say, medium gray. And then I'm going to take the road here and color it into an even darker gray. All right, so that's more clear. So now the terrain that we're going to be using is white and the rest is gray. All right, so the next category of adjustments that we'll need to make to this terrain will require us to use some plugins. So that's something that we will see in the next clip.